Oh, a little dark, sorry. Yes, here we are, WordofGord, Spirit Contact. And it seems like a good time to approach this situation. And let me just focus in on this particular interaction. Outside, well, a fairly elaborate synagogue in what I'm guessing is Astral Plane, Montreal. As I've mentioned before, and others have mentioned, there are astral plane versions of every city on the planet. So when I say Astral Plane Montreal, you can understand that, as glamorous as it may sound, that's not uncommon. Waiting outside, a bit like a reporter. It's the funniest feeling, waiting outside this projection of me that's there, this Gordon guy that does this work. And there are people that are leaving. And I see him and I gesture. And he seems to understand why I'm gesturing. And he makes some remarks to the people he's with and moves over toward me. And I say, "Good day, Mr. Cohen. How are you?" "I'm very well, thank you. I am even better than I hoped I would be, much better." "And who might you be?" And I explain who I am and what I'm doing, and which you can all guess from previous spirit contacts. And he says, Roshi said you would come by. And I said, well, that leads me into my first question, Mr. Cohen. How are you combining the two worlds of your birth religion and your practice of Zen, Buddhism? And he seems to feel that it is not as much of a, what's he saying, challenge as he thought it might be. In fact, he wasn't sure what challenges he would face in this heavenly world that he lives in now. But it's not nearly the challenge that he might have suspected had he worried about it ahead of time. He was saying how keen he was to meet again, forget the rebit, his, I believe, uncles, grandparents, who were prominent members of the Jewish community in Physical Plane, Montreal, when he was a boy, and who introduced him to the, what's he going to say, serene grandeur of the experience of being there. And those people he was with were part of that extended group, although they certainly don't look like revered elder members of any community at this point. They're young and vibrant and, dare I say it, handsome. And they're talking amongst themselves some yards away as I chat on. And he Mr. Cohen seems to understand what I'm doing and why I'm there. And he says, he's saying something about, or he's communicating it, maybe not saying, his lips are moving, but the voice seems to be in my head. This new life is a wonder to behold and experience. It is more than I had hoped for in studying the ancient texts and meditating on the Mediocre futility of my life? Why, Mr. Cohen, I would not call it mediocre or futile, but I accede to your phrasing. Many hundreds and thousands of people will be missing your eloquent wisdom expressed in your songs. And he apologizes for that, but feels that it was his time to move. He had given his message. He had communicated his song and his reverence for the divinity that he sensed hovered above and beyond him. And he feels even closer to that divinity now. And I tell him I understand that. I am a practiced mover amongst these worlds, and I'm more than glad to parlay that insight to any who will be listening and watching on the internet. In his usual gracious and grateful manner, he expresses his thanks for my efforts in this area. He does not know much about this sort of thing, but has heard of it from others, and he declined to enthuse about it in his physical life, although he followed a number of spiritual paths at various times in his span as Leonard Cohen. A span he still feels strongly within him, he says. He still feels very much like Leonard Cohen the singer, Leonard Cohen the entertainer, and I don't know, what's he saying, all-round creative artist, although he's saying it rather sardonically. He wishes to give his love to all those who had supported him in his journey through life. He knows there are many of you, and he gives it all equally and without pride or reservation. To his children, he gives the same love that he always gave. And to all that would aspire to spiritual understanding, he says, keep at your path. Do not fall by the wayside. It will blossom within you and bloom into greater and greater understandings the more that you devote yourself to it, whatever your path. Is there any more, he asks me. And I say, I'm sure people would like to know if you would continue on your creative path in the worlds of spirit. He says he's taking some rest and recuperation and time to adjust and see if he has actually anything further to communicate. Perhaps he is at the end of all striving, he says. Perhaps it is time to rest with the prophets and angels. Although where he is now is very human. And everyone is here, he says. Everyone that ought to be here is here. I presume he means extended family members by that. There's the familiar doffing of the hat. I extend my hand, and he extends his. And I mention briefly my own love for his music, which struck me as a young man. And he graciously nods, communicating a level of humility that we're actually quite familiar with from all his many utterances and interviews over the years. I tell him this will go on the internet, and he says he understands. Greetings to all on earth who would care to be greeted by this humble servant of the light. Thank you, sir. And he turns and walks back to the group of people he is with, or was with. My perception of time in these matters is somewhat problematic. One gets previsions and one gets recurrences. And if you check out the work of other psychic mediums, you will find this is not so unusual. It happens to us all. I got the indication just 20 minutes before actually doing this video that the connection was there. I'd felt the connection before, a feeling, a presence, a vibration for a couple of weeks at least. Kind of not really wanting to be disturbed, but at the same time understanding that there is a need to bridge the gap. And today, I guess, was the day, at least for us here on Earth. Not sure they have they measure things in terms of days and where he is now, which is where a lot of the dead people are. So, for those of you who care, I also care. The Sisters of Mercy, they are not departed or gone, and neither are the brothers. That's it for now, friends. Blessings.